So my name is Julien Meyer. I'm French and I've been living just now 5 years in Brazil. And I'm a linguist and bioacoustician. Bioacoustics is the communication in the context of the nature and taking into account the influence of biotope on communication. And so I apply that to language mostly. And my project is mostly about the impact of the environment on human communication, either during hunting or during long-distance communication in traditional means. And so here I've been invited and I propose to speak about the link between and the parallel between biological diversity threatening or protection and linguistic diversity protection. Well, I'm really pleased to be here and to realize when I see the other presentations how mine is really linked to what has just been said by Carlos and others. For example, in Nepal, I've been working on Shepan, for example, Shepan language, which is a key language for the systems I've been describing and I speak to you about. And how the traditional knowledge is emphasized in your presentation shows or justifies why I've been well invited here, I think. The first reason, I think, was that I won these Rolex Awards. I'm a linguist and bioacoustician, and when I won these Rolex Awards, it was because I applied to it, and I applied to it because in research, when I came back from 14 months of field work, I came back with many projects, many ideas of future projects, many data recorded, and I couldn't find a place to safeguard my data in France, for example, about traditional knowledge, about well, the films that I had recorded. And so I had to create myself an archive. And I had no money to do this. That's why I applied to these Rolex Awards. So I will present you first rapidly the origin of this project that I made for Rolex Awards, and then how I connected to other linguists, doing also archives, and how I went to Brazil to work on with an archive of the Museu Goldie, which is one of the leading safeguarding archives of indigenous languages in the Amazon. So, besides working on normal speech, I've been really interested in the adaptation of normal speech to long-distance communication, either with drum languages. You know that in Africa it's very well known that people in several cultures of West Africa in particular used drums to imitate speech, to communicate in the long distance. And this way, the impact of the environment was important on the long-distance communication because it was the way it was transmitted between the people. And so, like in normal speech, we couldn't get rid of this impact of the environment. I've been interested by that, and here you see a photo of And so on the right you see the drum of the Bora people of Amazonia, which is the only surviving the only surviving language of adapted in drum speech. And on the left you see another adaptation which is the adaptation in whistling of the whistle Spanish of the Spanish language in La Gomera Island. And below you see the map of the different languages that we identified that used whistling to communicate in the distance. And what is interesting is that these have survived, these kind of languages survive in response to these acoustic constraints, and they have developed all over the world, and they survive only in well, isolated places which have kept this traditional way of life. Otherwise, it is dead in the other places. And they survive in two different, very typical biotopes. One with dense forest, and the other with cliffy mountains. And well, this gives to these populations that we met on the field a key situation and symbolic situation, because the fact that this way of speaking survives means that they still have their traditional knowledge, and the fact that they are isolated means also that they are living in places where the knowledge, the biological description is not sometimes hardly made. So that's the reason why I tried to connect to the people who had described the link between, well, language diversity and biodiversity. And these people were the people working on endangered languages, because they needed to convince the international well, audience that the vanishing linguistic diversity was a serious problem. And so they used the vocabulary of the people speaking about biologic diversity. And as all the systems I was working on were endangered, the connection with them was very direct. And you see here the research continues on these aspects. I show here some connections that have been made. New papers highlight the correlation in a very scientific way between the places of well, language endangerment, the hotspots of language endangerment, and the hotspots of well, biological conservation priorities. So why do we care about this vanishing diversity? It's because just like for biological diversity, we have a lot. We know that there are a lot of languages, around well 6,000, 7,000 languages, but we don't know exactly what is this diversity. We know that human beings speak this language, but we don't know how many there are. We know, however, by projections that 50% of them are threatened by the end of this century, and in some regions like the Americas, nearly 90%, where we're speaking about identity and history of the people and the traditional knowledge, and also scientific knowledge and the connection between the two. And well, we know also that just like for biologic diversity, there is the documentation and the description that has been made about these languages is very little in front of, well, all what we know. For example, we more or less know 3,000 languages, and only 10% of them are well described. So the UNESCO, again, inspired by what has been done on biological diversity, has developed some tools to alert on this problem, and they grouped some experts to define some criteria that are important to assess the vitality and the endangerment of the languages. They have opened an oral and intangible heritage department, and they also launched with these experts and local experts an atlas of the world's language in danger of disappearing. In the academic world, the methodology which was traditionally used was adapted from only description to documentation and description with video, audio, text and photos. and archiving sometimes, not always, with some new fundings that came from international and national initiatives, like Dobes in Germany, for example, from the Volkswagen Foundation, or like in SOAS in England, the Ansrausing project. And in the Museo Goldie, for example, the nationally funded project of the archive of the lenguas indigenous da Amazonia. So, also one important aspect is that we had to adapt to the need of return of the information that was collected to the local linguistic communities. Some linguists did that before, but now it's inscribed in the methodology, and also respond to some needs of revitalization sometimes, given that the possibility to respond to these needs is also limited sometimes by some political risks taken by either the researcher or the people implied, because, for example, in China or in Brazil, the limits of revitalization, or in France, are not the same, due to some laws that link the language to the identity of the place, to the identity, and to the ecology of languages inside the history of each place. All that is made most of the time in collaboration with local associations. And I would like to present here some results. Yes. And well, the first image on the left is the place where I've been working in Brazil. It speaks about the delimitation of lands, nationally protected land, and you see that the limit here, this limit here, is exactly the limit of the indigenous reserve. And this means that this protection has protected not only the language, but also the knowledge of this place, the traditional knowledge on the forest in this place. Then you see here some archives. One example, sorry, in Brazil. Here the copy of this archive in SOAS in England. And you see that here some initiatives made in the Museo Goldie, in one of the projects that I've been running, of training of the local people, either inviting them in the museum or directly in the field. And some results also of edition to return the information or to develop methods to teach how to keep your language alive, or how to continue to practice or to learn back a practice which is severely endangered due to the pressure of deforestation, for example. Thank you very much.